Hello, I'm Kent Myers.
I'm Mick Cornett, and it's time for The Verdict. As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crowe and Dunleavy Law Firm presents The Verdict, an objective discussion of contemporary legal issues hosted by Kent Myers. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma. And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. Well, this week's show has a strange title. We call it, First, Let's Kill All the Lawyers. Now, we borrowed that title from Shakespeare, but the issue is really this. What is the image of the lawyer in today's society? And let me introduce one of Oklahoma's top legal experts and my co-host, Kent Myers. Kent, what are you thinking coming up with a topic like this?
Well, I thought we'd increase our ratings. I thought if people thought that might happen on this show...
If they thought we were going to kill all the lawyers.
That's exactly right. Now, let me ask you a question, Mick. Okay. What's black and brown and looks good on a lawyer? A Doberman. All right. Part of what we're talking about here is lawyer jokes. The public perception of lawyers, public perception of the legal profession. It ranges anywhere from just kind of making casual fun of it to an unrelenting criticism to outright hate. This is something that for lawyers who've been practicing a while is relatively new to them. 30 years ago, this probably wasn't the concept at least as much as it is today. And today we want to talk to our viewers through our guests, our great guests I might add, about the legal profession. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it both?
Or is the system broken?
Is the system broken? And if so, what do we do about it?
All right. Look forward to it. It's an interesting topic, the public's perception of the legal profession. Should be a lively discussion right here on The Verdict.
It's got to be around here somewhere.
Don't worry, we'll find it. Just calm down.
I swear it was right here on the desk.
All right, if I were a will, where would I be?
It's the only copy. Without it, we're out $3 million.
I know.
Hey, accidents happen. If a condom breaks
Or you have unprotected sex.
You have 72 hours to reduce
your risk of getting pregnant. It's called emergency contraception.
Got questions?
Call Planned Parenthood.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and we're ready to discuss the public's perception of the legal profession. Kent, why don't you introduce our guests?
Two people that are the best qualified to talk about this we're lucky enough to have with us today. On my right, from Washington, D.C., is Jim Turner, the Executive Director of HALT, an organization with the name HALT, which stands for Help Abolish Legal Tyranny. Jim has worked as a counsel for a number of government agencies and committees. He's a graduate of Cornell University, undergraduate, and he got his Juris Doctorate degree at Catholic University and has written a number of articles on the subject we're going to be talking about today. And Jim, thanks for coming from Washington to be with us.
Pleasure to be with you, Ken.
On my left is Andy Coates, an old friend of mine and colleague. He is currently the Dean of the University of Oklahoma College of Law. Andy is immediate past and the only Oklahoman ever to be president of the American College of Trial Lawyers, the national president. He's a former district attorney of Oklahoma County, a former Oklahoma City mayor, practiced privately for a number of years, and graduated both undergraduate and law school from the University of Oklahoma. Andy, it's really a pleasure to have you too.
Thank you. Nice to be with all of you.
The first thing I want to bring up is a graphic. I want to see what Willie Shakespeare had to say when he said, or what he meant when he said, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. That's from Henry VI. And as the applause dies down, Andy, what did Bill Shakespeare mean? Did he hate lawyers?
Well, I don't know what his personal feelings were. I know that in this particular instance, they were talking about a revolution, and they were going to install a tyrannous government, and it couldn't work unless they killed the lawyers, because the lawyers were the people that stood between the government and the people and represented them. And so you have to consider the source. He was not a very reputable person who said it, and he said it at a time and in a way that they were plotting to overthrow the current government.
Jim?
There's a grain of truth in that sentiment, and you'll see it today when you read that quote because of the titters that you'll hear throughout the crowd. And I think that that reflects a well-seated sense of frustration and resentment amongst millions and millions of ordinary people at what they perceive to be an alienating and distant legal system that no longer serves the role that it was supposed to serve in our country.
Well, you travel around the country, you deal with this subject all the time. Do you find people that actually hate lawyers?
Sure. I mean, there's people that hate anything. I mean, it's that's wide open. I think what I can say that's helpful is that there really is a deep-seated sense of frustration and resentment that really traces to two failings of our current civil justice system. The first is in terms of access. For literally tens and tens of millions of middle-income Americans, the price of hiring a lawyer is beyond their reach, and they can't get through the legal system without legal assistance. And that breeds frustration for people who have had an unfortunate experience with a dishonest lawyer or who have been taken by the legal system. There is also a deep sense of resentment because the existing mechanisms of lawyer self-regulation and self-control do not offer meaningful compensation to people who have been taken by dishonest lawyers or who have had a unfortunate experience. And that combination of those two factors, resentment and frustration, I think is why you hear more lawyer jokes, why you hear people laughing at a line that Shakespeare had intended to talk about tyranny when it's taken in a modern context.
Yeah. Andy, what's your perception? You deal with the legal profession and have for many years. What's your perception of the public's perception today?
Well, I think there's a good deal in what he says, and I think there is certainly an element in our country that is underrepresented, and I think we have created barriers that need to be solved and resolved that would allow access to the system. On the other side of it, I'm always fascinated by the idea. It seems to me the people who are the most critical of lawyers are anxious for their children to become one. And so we have lots and lots of people that say lots of bad things about lawyers, and yet they're awfully disappointed when their child can't get into law school. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. It's almost a love-hate relationship. I mean, many of our heroes, Atticus Finch, people like that are folks that people look up to, and that's still true in many, many towns and cities across the United States. The lawyers take the lead in so many charitable and worthwhile organizations that they're. And there is the feeling the polls show of the idea that people really like their lawyer very much but don't like lawyers generally. and which is an interesting part of it. It's the adversary system.
Andy, do you think, is there one moment in time that you can trace back and say, I think that's when public perception really started to turn against the legal profession?
I think it's always been there. You go back into the early English literature, and there's always been discomfort with the writings at the time of Napoleon. The writings throughout the early American Revolution had distrust and anger towards lawyers, partially because people didn't understand the system, partially because people represent or resent someone who has a different view and has different knowledge than they have. So there's all kinds of, but it goes a long time. It may be more focused today because of the media that we're bombarded with, because people are more aware of current things going on, but it's always been there. I think there's always been some reluctance and some resentment of lawyers.
Well, Jim, the legal profession has its own code of ethics, code of professional responsibility. What can be wrong with an organization that and a group of people that try to live up to standards higher than what are present in the marketplace?
You'd be tempted to say nothing, but that wouldn't fit reality. The problem with, in my view, with the current system of legal ethics is that people who hire lawyers don't know much about it. And if you got the best ethics in the world, it doesn't do much good if everybody doesn't know about it.
Well, how do you change that?
3 states have done something to try to change that. New York, Florida, and Illinois, all in different sorts of ways, have put out what's called a Consumer Bill of Rights, legal Consumer Bill of Rights. In New York, they post it in the attorney's office. In Florida, it's included in the actual retainer agreement that you sign with the lawyer. So there's some basic consumer information actually in the client's hands that tells them what to do if there's a problem and gives them some guidance. We at HALT proposed that to the Ethics 2000 Commission at the American Bar Association, and we were unsuccessful in getting that accepted. But to me, it's a common sense kind of approach that you have good ethics. On paper, they're good, but you got to put real teeth behind them, and the way you put real teeth behind them is you have them public and have everybody know about them who actually is using them.
Let me interject here, Kent. Let's go ahead and take a break. Hold everybody's thought. I'm going to interrupt, and we'll be right back. We're discussing the public's perception of the legal profession. What's your verdict?
Yeah, campfire's a lot of fun. You get to make some friends. You get to do some cool stuff. Campfire's for boys too, not just girls. But hey, campfire's definitely for kids. So call the campfire office nearest you to join in on the fun. 'Cause let's face it, you're not getting any younger.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable private Catholic education balanced with dedication to community and service makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Every day Americans make this pledge, but few think about its significance. It's our job to make justice a reality by providing legal representation for all citizens. Legal services, keeping the promise of America.
Every day, in state governments throughout the country, crucial decisions are being made that affect the lives of children and their families. But as this process takes place, children are often left voiceless. When these children raise their hands to be heard, is anyone listening? There are people listening. They are child advocates. Join us and raise your hand for kids.
We're discussing the public's perception of the legal profession. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with my co-host Kent Myers. Kent, where do we go from here?
Let's talk about lawyers that go bad, lawyers that do things wrong. Jim, we have discipline in this state and others for lawyers, usually administered by the Bar Association or the Supreme Court. Is that working?
I don't think it's working real well, Kent. And
how could it be improved?
It could be improved first by opening up the process. In most states, there is some degree of secrecy. It varies from state to state how much. By having greater lay participation. Most states are dominated by lawyers in the disciplinary proceedings. And by applying other remedies outside the lawyer disciplinary system to lawyers. In 4 states, consumer fraud acts are applied to lawyers who overbill clients, perform business kinds of misconduct in their relationship with their clients. There's no reason that that shouldn't be put in place in Oklahoma. It's really, to me, a terrible irony to have the people who are most responsible for the laws and for enforcing the laws to be above some of the most critical consumer protections, which is the way it is in state after state. And I think that those 3 elements would go a long way to making it a lot better.
What do you think about that, Andrew?
Well, I think there's really 2 aspects of it. You have to talk about the way it actually works and the way it's perceived to work. And the problems, I think, are more in the perceptions than they are in the way it actually functions. We are officers of the court, and as officers of the court, ultimate discipline resides in the Supreme Court. And believe me, the Supreme Court takes a very strong look at lawyer disciplinary problems. And while the early stages of it are held just like a trial, the ultimate results go by reports to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides if someone is disbarred or is in some other way punished. And those are public. The possibility of making the activities and the procedures public earlier might have a beneficial effect, and I think the bar ought to take a look at, and the court ought to take a look at, making the process a little more available so that the perceptions are better. But I think, in fact, we see an awful lot of lawyers that deserve being disciplined, and we see others that are charged that, like anywhere else, that are not ultimately disciplined.
Well, Jim, let me ask you about the person we haven't talked about yet, the client. We've been talking about the lawyers. How are the clients being protected?
Oh, that's exactly the point that I wanted to make, Kent. The legal profession is pretty good at cleaning up its own house if you got an alcoholic lawyer, somebody who's neglecting clients, who's embarrassing the profession. But in terms of making the client who is lost out whole with compensation, the picture isn't nearly as rosy. In every state in the country now, there is a client compensation fund that the Bar Associations has set up.
To pay money to clients that lawyers have stolen from them.
Exactly. Yeah. So somebody, you give your down payment on a house and the lawyer takes off with it.
To Jamaica or something.
Somewhere where you can't get them. The ABA, American Bar Association, recommends that those funds should have money adequate to pay out $50 in compensation for every lawyer in the state. Oklahoma today pays out $5, less than $5 in compensation, and that pattern is repeated across the country. So there is a problem that is not just one of perception, but that is one of the organized bar failing to meet the standards that really ought to be met if there's going to be meaningful compensation. And then the second thing I'd say again, using consumer fraud statutes in lieu of, instead of just malpractice to compensate people who have been cheated by lawyers is much more powerful medicine, and it ought to be in place across the whole country.
Andy, you've been practicing a long time and been in court an awful lot. Do you perceive any decline in civility among the lawyers or any decline in ethical behavior over the course of your career?
Certainly, the civility aspect of the profession is one that worries you a lot, worries me a lot. And one of the reasons I came back to the College of Law was the hope that I could help the people understand that civility between lawyers and the opposing clients and the courts is absolutely the lubrication which makes the system work. And I think all of us are very concerned about the idea that we don't have the Rambo lawyers and the obtrusive and unnecessary litigants, that we find some way to deal with those more effectively. So yes, I think there has been some decline. I think, however, hopefully it's sort of bottomed out. Everybody is working on civility. All the law schools now have programs to deal with civility. There are awards and scholarships and all kinds of things for faculty to work on civility problems. And hopefully we can come back to a time when certainly you aggressive. Certainly the lawsuits are tried in a combative way, but that at the end of the day, the civility between all of the parties is improved.
Well, Jim, HALT puts out a publication from time to time in which you give cheers to places and jeers to places, and I was pleased to note that Oklahoma got a cheers. Could you tell our viewers about that?
Yeah, Oklahoma is in the forefront. Only one other state that I know of, Massachusetts, is going in this direction of putting law libraries in the courthouses that are open to the public and available.
In every county.
In every county, and that's a real step forward. But Oklahoma's also got something pending right now I want to talk about. In the state Senate, House has already passed HB 1381, which would raise the small claims court limit from $4,500 to $7,500. That's a real important reform.
Why?
Because the small claims courts are the real people's courts. That's where stuff that shouldn't be cluttering up courts of general jurisdiction can get hurt. It's like Judge Judy. You go in without a lawyer, you set out your case in plain English, and you win or you lose to the end of the day.
We need to go to final arguments here, for lack of a better term. Andy, can you sum up how you feel about this issue in 30, 40 seconds?
Well, obviously, over the years, we've been disappointed in the public reaction to lawyers. Those of us that have given our life to the profession and to the system of justice are sensitive about that. I think there are a lot of great efforts going forward to try to improve the relations of the bar, the relations, and to support the system of justice. But we know there are problems out there, and the problems that Jim has mentioned are very real. And we just think that there must be solutions, and we're seeking to find those solutions.
Jim, what's your strongest point?
We haven't done enough yet. The system can be made to work better, and it's up to not just lawyers, but to consumers. You got to get smart. The legal system is now too much a part of everyone's life to treat it ignorantly. You can find out stuff from all kinds of sources. One of them is www.halt.org. Visit our website. We got all kinds of public information. You should take advantage of it and learn how to take control of your own legal affairs, too.
Let me give you a chance to give that web address one more time.
www.halt.org, O-R-G. Please visit us.
Thank you both for coming. It's been great.
Pleasure.
My pleasure.
We're going to wrap it up right there. Kent and I'll be back with a final word in a moment. You're watching The Verdict.
In Oklahoma, there are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We've been discussing the public's perception of attorneys, and it crossed my mind that back in the 1970s, when attorneys were allowed to legally advertise for the first time, if the advent of those ads hasn't somehow adversely affected the profession as a whole?
I think it's been mixed. I think the public perception of lawyers that advertise and advertise heavily and advertise perhaps in certain areas has led to some deterioration in the perception. I think on the other hand, lawyer advertising has really been good for the consumer, because the type of legal service that is typically advertised is giving information to the consumer that the consumer wants and may not have available any other way. So I think it's a mixed bag. Another thing that has occurred to me, Mick, is do we have too many lawyers? My brother likes to tell a story of that when one lawyer was the only lawyer in town, he was starving, and when one moved in next door to him, they both got rich. It seems like that it takes more than one to do well. We have more lawyers in Washington, D.C. than in Japan. 2/3 of all the world's lawyers are in the United States. One can say we have way too many. Some would also say one's too many. But in any event, I think the proliferation of lawyers has added to the problems.
Because they're competing against each other?
They're competing. There's only so much legal business to go around. As the number of lawyers increase and the legal business remains relatively static, there's more competition for it. And some of that competition can get downright vicious and to some unseemly. Others have said that lawyers just can darn sure dish it out, but they can't take it. Maybe they are better in court when they're protected and can say what they want to within certain guidelines, and yet when people start saying things back to them, maybe they're too thin-skinned. Maybe they take themselves too seriously. I like Oscar Wilde's statement that life's too important to be taken seriously. And I think the lawyers sometimes take too serious a view of themselves. I personally like the joke about, this studio gets cold sometimes when we come in. I like the joke about it was so cold outside the lawyer had his hands in his own pockets. I just don't think we ought to take this too seriously. We ought to clean up our messes. We ought to discipline publicly lawyers that need it and keep trying to render service to the public.
All right. And we'll be back next week on The Verdict. This program was brought to you by Crow and Dunlevy, a professional corporation, and also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma.